You know, the main character is usually overlooked by a wide majority for ranging possibilities, often criticized to be bland, generic, and quite boring. How often the side casts are cast aside to bring forefront to the leading character, and in other cases, they are morally grey. They are essentially meant to be the driving force of a story as the number one character you follow. However, there is meant to be something about them, anything, to make the viewer want to care. I myself used to not specifically pay attention to many of the main characters in this medium due to similar reasons. I had a few favorites growing up, but for the majority, I found myself overlooking them. However, this changed. This changed when I first watched One Piece, and through my voyage over 900 episodes. After completing my journey of the high seas over 5 years ago, I began to appreciate the main characters in every other series I've watched since through following this character's story. I am of course talking about one of the most familiar faces in the anime genre from Eiichiro Oda's masterclass of a series,
Monkey D. Luffy.
In recent times, as One Piece has gotten more popular through its various marketing properties, Luffy's face has become more and more iconic to even those who have never watched anime before. You could even argue that he has become the face of modern anime. One Piece is one of few series to have a main character that is widely loved by so many globally. But before we go into why, we need to discuss his character. Now I know what we One Piece fans are like. We love to dissect every small piece of information and write countless theories based on it and each individual character. Some view Luffy to be one-dimensional whilst others view him to be deeply complex. The best main character in Battle Shonen. Much like Goku, who he was heavily inspired by, Luffy shares a bubbly personality, a strong love for food, and strive to get stronger, both for different reasons. And whilst they share those traits, they are also quite different. Luffy's growth doesn't come with his personality traits. I mean, he hasn't changed much in that regard. From chapter 1 to chapter whatever we're at now, Luffy has for the majority remained the same. The same lovable, goofy ray of sunshine that's brought smiles to the faces of many, and we love him for it. There are smaller aspects in which he has matured as a person, i.e. the Wano arc for example. His promise to make this country a place where Tama and everyone can eat as much as they want, whenever they want. His promise to put Wano on his back as Kinemon begged, telling Momonosuke not to mention him as a hero because there's no need to. Understanding the weight of facing Kaido compared to Alabasta, in which he didn't entirely care for saving that country, but instead choosing so through his friendship with Vivi. Here, he understood the stakes and the value of his actions. His development is relatively subtle and not in your face like Eren and Thorfinn were. And whilst that's all worth noting, his progression comes from the form of him as a captain. In the earlier arcs, it goes without saying that Luffy honestly wasn't that great of a captain. Time and time again, Zoro, Sanji, and even Nami had to reprimand him for the countless mistakes he was making and correct him on what he should have already known. He was always a great friend to those who considered him one and a rising pirate. However, due to his love of adventure, he admittedly put his crew in danger quite a few times. This changed when he fought Admiral Aokiji and lost in embarrassing fashion. The entire Water 7 saga, as a matter of fact, was the first crucial point of this progression. Water 7 is considered to be one of the best arcs in One Piece, and I honestly agree for many reasons. This was the first time Luffy's leadership was put to the test. One of the more emotional moments of the series plays out in this arc. The entire fight and confrontation between Luffy and Usopp, which happens to be my favorite fight in One Piece. From coming to the decision to part ways with the Going Merry earlier in the arc, this causes a rift within the crew. Going Merry has received considerable damages through the voyage and unfortunately is beyond repair, thus Luffy making this hard decision. A decision that wasn't just hard for Usopp, but for the whole crew. However, Luffy had to think of the safety of his crew, one that would benefit them. Usopp then left the crew and challenged Luffy to a duel, which he accepted. I mean, he'd be setting a bad example if he didn't. And once it was over, the crew finally acknowledged Luffy's leadership and were completely silent. Luffy, who was always sure of everything and saw the bright side to everything, couldn't this time. He was broken, shattered. His mind was all over the place.
それがキャプテンだろ。迷うな。お前がフラフラしてやがったら、俺たちは誰を信じりゃいいんだよ。
In this moment, Luffy finally understood his responsibilities and the weight of being a captain. Zoro has been a crucial anchor to Luffy's growth, especially in this very saga. This very moment, for instance, he had to be the one to pull Luffy back in and remind him that he and only he has a role to fulfill. Despite the tough decisions, the crew looks to him and needs to be aware of, cause if not, they'll break apart. And fast forward to the end of the saga, Zoro once again had to tell Luffy this regarding his decision to invite Usopp back into the crew. How a captain should demand respect and loyalty, and a crewmate that doesn't have that would be a detriment and shouldn't be allowed back. How their trust in each other has to be as tough as steel or they won't survive. And if there's none of that, he would leave. Because... And by this point, their pirate crew was established to the world. I know this video isn't about Zoro, Usopp, or any of the Straw Hats, but the role they play is vital that it's important to mention. With all that in mind, Luffy leaves Water 7 with a considerable first nail of growth as a captain. Then comes the Summit War Saga. If the events of Water 7 and Enies Lobby were meant to break and revamp Luffy, this entire saga breaks him down all over again, countless times. Shabundi Archipelago is the beginning of his downfall, losing his crew, getting sent away to different islands, losing every battle he's come across, even with the smaller of foes, and of course, after all his efforts, loses his brother right in front of him. Through all of this, Luffy realizes that he needs to take time away to get stronger and shares that with his crew. And 2 years later, they come back with a storm. Luffy grows considerably, not only in physical prowess but as a leader. He took charge of that role as he finally knows what he's doing. His crewmates displaying full devotion, earning that title and full trust of a captain. Post time skip across the board, Luffy has learned the lessons of leading a massive crew and has progressed and is still progressing as a leader. You only learn from hardships after all. His speeches to Momo and the entirety of Whole Cake Island is proof of this. But that's only one component of Luffy. He acts before he has a thought. In fact, thinking isn't even a factor. He moves the plot forward simply by being proactive. His subtle emotional intelligence is another strong arsenal of his, and we've seen it numerous times. My favorite scene of this series, and the one that sold me onto One Piece, goes all the way back to Arlong Park. Luffy and Nami's moment where she's asking for help is powerful. There didn't need to be a drawn out back and forth or anything of the sort. This is why this moment works so well, because Luffy, instead of saying anything, lets his actions speak louder. Said action was trusting Nami with his treasure as he goes to reclaim hers. He didn't need to know her backstory. He didn't care to know. He trusted Nami to ask for help on her own and as a friend. Luffy remained silent. And there's been other examples of this, of instances where Luffy's emotional intelligence and subtlety drives the plot forward, and they would play out exactly the same every single time, because that's how he is. That's how Luffy's character has always been, perfectly in line. He's never been someone to care for someone's past. It's the past for a reason. If you've made an impact on him, he'll fight your corner to the very end. Let's say this Nami moment plays out differently. Let's say instead of Luffy it was Zoro or any of the Straw Hats. Or if this was a main character from another series. If Luffy gave a dramatically emotional speech like Naruto or Deku, instead of remaining silent and placing his hat, it wouldn't have been impactful in any fashion. Not only would it be out of character for Luffy and remove the subtleness of his emotional intelligence, but it also wouldn't have properly completed Nami's progression. Nothing would have really been resolved. Luffy didn't help Nami until she herself specifically asked for help, reinforcing his strengths, and is why this moment works so well. It all left me utterly speechless when first watching. Through this and similar events with Usopp, Robin, Sanji, and even Ace, brings another element to Luffy: liberation and freedom. Nami was able to freely express her desperate plea for help simply just by being there. Same case with Robin truly expressing her wish to live, all because Luffy was there to encourage their pleas to come from their mouths, to free them not only from their situations but from the invisible gag blocking them to speak, to liberate them from false pretenses, to live freely. Luffy even does this with characters outside of his crew. Kobe, for instance. After meeting the young pirate, he was inspired to stand up against Alvida and fight for his dream of joining the Navy, becoming the proud Marine he is today. Katakuri as well. Over the course of their fight, he goes from being stoic and efficient into a loud, outgoing fighter just like Luffy. He realized the light his family saw him in wasn't true and wasn't worthwhile, as Luffy was the only one to accept him for who he was, thus falling on his back as a sign of respect. We may not know what his true dream actually is, but from chapter 1, his goal was to always find the One Piece and to be the king of the pirates. When asked by Rayleigh if he had what it takes to conquer the seas, he simply states, "I'm not going to conquer anything. The one who is the most free is the Pirate King." Luffy embodies the theme of freedom. He's always strived to be the freest man of the sea. Through his actions, through his ideals, he's liberated and freed the lives of many, his friends, and various countries. Freedom is a massive theme in One Piece, and Luffy is a perfect representation of that theme. Now, I've already gone into great lengths in discussing Luffy and his embodiment of freedom on countless One Piece videos in the past, so I'll wrap this portion up with this. In a world where freedom comes at a cost, Luffy remained a shining star in a dark, cruel world. As mentioned before, Luffy is simple enough to understand. A young pirate who was inspired by another to become a great one, who grew up alone most of his life, bashfully himself, loudly declares his desires and would risk his own life to protect his close ones before his own, striving to continuously get stronger, all for the purpose of keeping his friends close, because being alone is worse than getting hurt. All of these components of Luffy are incredibly strong and make him stand out. There honestly couldn't have been a better main character for this series. The world of One Piece is centered around the themes shared with Luffy: dreams, adventure, and freedom. Luffy's strengths complement the world and overall plot. However, his weaknesses are also made apparent. He has become a man many people can rely on. To quote Mihawk, "It's not some sort of special power, but he has the ability to make allies with everyone he meets, and that is the most fearsome ability on the high seas." Normally, when reading a battle shonen story, I tend to enjoy it for what it is, as well as the characters involved, whether they're touched upon or not. A majority of the time, I find myself not caring for half of the cast due to similar traits with existing characters, or authors not caring too much. However, One Piece is different. Each character sparks a new light into their world. The countless flashbacks provided adds a deeper meaning and grows a deeper connection to even the smallest of characters which Luffy interacts with. Eiichiro Oda made a character that is universally loved in universe and out. He says what needs to be said, he does what many wouldn't think to do, and it's all genuine. You may believe Luffy is a stupid, happy-go-lucky rubbery boy who loves to eat and beat up bad guys, which often is viewed to be boring, or you may view him to be a complex protagonist with deeper layers than mentioned. And if you believe either, then that is okay. I view this character to be genius, despite having elements of substance, to also be simple. And sometimes, simple is better. It's why I enjoy his character quite a lot, it's why many can't help but cheer for him, and it's why he works. In the past, I've mentioned how much I love Luffy and Goku in the same sentence, and how much these two characters have been integral to their respective stories in two completely different ways. This video right here explains how Goku is important to Dragon Ball. Click here to see why.